this lesson's about cancer. Here are your objectives. In the previous lesson, we talked about cell cycle control. And now we're going to take that a step further and talk about cancer, because cancer is essentially a disease where cell cycle control breaks down. Let's define some terms. A tumor is an abnormal tissue mass. And the way that it arises is that either there is increased division of cells or decreased death of cells, and cell death is a normal part of the life of a multicellular organism. So either you've got too many cells being made or too few cells dying. Now, a tumor can be either benign or malignant. Let's start by defining malignant tumors first. A malignant tumor is one that invades tissues locally. So if this is the wall of a tissue and you've got a tumor growing here, if it starts to invade into the tissues around it, that's a characteristic of a malignant tumor. As well, malignant tumors metastasize. That means that they spread to other tissues, and they do that via either the blood vessels or the lymphatic vessels. Both of these vessel systems, the blood vessel system and the lymphatic vessel system, allow them access to other parts of the body where they can similarly set up shop and then invade tissues. The first malignant tumor to arise is called the primary tumor, and then when it spreads, when it metastasizes, and the noun for the process of metastasizing is metastasis, after metastasis there are secondary tumors, tumors in other organs that have arisen from the spread of the primary tumor. For example, you might have a lung cancer, and then secondary tumors arise in places like the liver, the adrenal glands, or the bones. And different kinds of primary tumors have different characteristic patterns of spread. And again, this spread is happening via the blood vessels and the lymphatic vessels. Now, when we have a malignant tumor, a tumor that invades locally and spreads, that's what we commonly refer to as cancer. So those are effectively synonymous, malignancy and cancer. Now, a benign tumor is one that is not malignant. In other words, it doesn't invade locally and it doesn't spread to more distant tissues. For example, moles are common benign tumors. There are uterine tumors called fibroids that are typically benign as well. There can be tumors of the linings around the brain called meningiomas that are benign. By the way, just because something is not malignant, meaning it's not going to invade or spread to more distant tissues, doesn't mean that it doesn't cause problems. For example, a meningioma that gets really big could cause problems because the skull has a fixed volume and it can start to compress brain tissue. But again, that problem of invading and spreading, metastasizing, that's characteristic of malignant tumors, not benign ones. Let's cover a little bit more terminology. The suffix gen usually indicates promotion or stimulation of something. So a mutagen promotes mutations, and a carcinogen promotes cancer, because a carcinoma is a kind of cancer. That's why it has that term. So mutagens can include things like UV radiation, certain kinds of chemicals like industrial chemicals or pesticides, smoking, etc. And things that are mutagens will also be carcinogens, because cancer is a genetic disease. You might not think of it as a genetic disease like you might think of other diseases like sickle cell anemia or cystic fibrosis, where they have a single mutation that results in them. But cancer, remember, results from an escape from cell cycle control. And there are multiple genes that are involved in regulating the cell cycle, and so you need multiple mutations to escape and set up a cancer. That's why cancer tends to be a disease of older people, because they've just had more time for those mutations to build up. So that's an introduction to terminology around cancer.